Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Spotlight series. Today is March 10th. Today we will have Dr. Erin Nickell, Assistant Professor of Accounting, speaking. The topic that Dr. Nickell will be speaking on is star quality, an exploration of a star rating system for individual audit partner quality and the potential impact to investor decision making. Thank you again, Dr. Nickell, and you can take it from there.
All right. So thank you to everyone that's in the room and anyone that watches this later. I am excited to say these things out loud. This project is a project I've been working on with my co-authors from Bentley University, Tyler Williams, and University of North Texas, Jared Utzler. And the three of us started working on this project a while ago, and we have collected data and started to analyze it. But right now we're at the stage where we're really trying to figure out what the data is telling us and figure out what story we would like to tell through our manuscript. So we've got an early draft of our manuscript, but presenting at this stage is extremely helpful because saying all of these things out loud and talking about the study and how it was designed is really helpful for kind of trying to figure out what story resonates best and what makes sense to a variety of listeners or a variety of readers. So any feedback that anybody has at this stage is entirely welcome. It is, again, a very early stage manuscript. And one thing that I definitely want the most from anybody that listens to this is, do you get it? Are there words that we use that could be better? Could we name our variables differently so that it makes more sense? Those types of things. So the first thing I want to do in this presentation is I'd like to start by, let me make sure I know how to advance my screen. Okay, I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of background because, again, the study's title, Exploration of a Star Rating System, and by the graphic you can kind of tell what I'm talking about, for individual audit partners. So what we're talking about is a study of using a star rating system to rank the quality of an auditor. So before we can really talk about that, I should probably cover a few basic background concepts like what's an auditor? What does an auditor do? Why should we care? And what do you need to know about auditors and the auditing profession before I can really explain to you what I've done and what I've found? So the background is that financial statement auditors, and my emojis didn't fully come through here, but those are clip arts instead. But the financial statement auditor is what we're talking about. A lot of times when you hear the word auditor, you think of the IRS, right, or an IRS governmental auditor. We're talking about financial statement auditors, and financial statement auditors, they usually are certified public accountants at some stage in their career. So they don't usually do taxes. They instead review companies' financial statements. So they review the financial statements that companies issue every year, and they provide some assurance that those are good, that they're free of material misstatement. The idea of financial statement auditors is to protect the public from the big greedy corporations, right? So we're protecting the interests of the investing public specifically. So anybody that's got their money invested in the benefits from the auditing profession, because the auditing profession serves as somewhat of a gatekeeper between large corporations, public companies that sell their stock on the stock exchange, and it provides a protection to the investing public. Okay, so that's who we are talking about, and the reason you should care, the reason we should care. Most of our accounting students actually start out as auditors. They become auditors as soon as they graduate. They'll start as staff auditors, and they kind of progress through their career as shown in this diagram. So they'll become a senior after about 2 or 3 years, a manager after 5 to 7 years, senior manager 7 to 10, and this can vary a lot, but that's sort of an average, and then eventually could become an audit partner, an equity owner in the firm. And the idea is that this progression to audit partner is important because only the audit partner actually can sign the audit opinion. So when they say the financial statements are free of misstatement, the audit partner is the one that signs the audit opinion. but they sign it not their own name. They sign the name of the firm that they work for. They sign on behalf of their firm. And so everyone that works on the audit engagement, it can include staff auditors, seniors, managers, et cetera. Everyone works on that audit engagement. It's not just the audit partner's work product. They're just the one that signs the ultimate opinion that the financial statements are A-OK. And so the other thing you need to know is that audit firms get sued a lot. If there's a fraud or if a company goes bankrupt and a lot of people lose a lot of money, the company would get in trouble first. But at some point, they might look to the auditor and say, hey, you said these financial statements were okay, and they were not. And we did, we made a lot of decisions based on that information. And we now believe that you, the audit firm, you were negligent when you said that the financial statements were okay. And so right now, the audit partner, the individual, they can't be sued, the person themselves, just the firm. So these are kind of important details leading into this study. And then the one other thing I need to tell you about, because it serves as the premise for this particular study, is that there is a new rule. And this rule was developed by the PCAOB, a Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and they audit the auditors. So they make sure that the auditing profession is adhering to all the right standards. And so they now require that all auditors file a form every time they do an audit of a public company that discloses the individual audit partner's name. So they've toyed with the idea of having the audit partner actually sign their personal name to the audit opinion, and that didn't go over so well. So they settled on having auditors file a form that discloses that name. So basically the idea is that they want to provide the investing public with as much information as possible. And that could be relevant to investors. They might want to know who was the audit partner on this engagement. And that information is now available through a searchable database called Auditor Search. And I intended to show you a little bit of how this is used. And I'm not going to do that, but this little screen shows you a screenshot of the Auditor Search. So you can go to the PCAOB's website, click on the link Auditor Search, and you can type in any public company's name, or if you happen to know an audit partner in your life, you can type in their name, and it'll pop up with every engagement that since 2017 that they have been in charge of. Okay, and they are meant to supervise that engagement. They don't usually do all the work, but they supervise it and sign the ultimate product. So the pros of this new rule are that, auditors now have more accountability, and that's good for the investing public. It makes them do a better job. It increases the quality of what we're doing, which is to protect the public from, falsified statements or misstated financial statements. It improves all the information that is included in the marketplace, right? All the information that we make financial decisions on, the quality of that information would be theoretically higher, protecting the public interest. Okay, so that is the background. And then what else you need to know is that, the PCAOB and the investing public think this is a great idea, right? Let's disclose the audit partner's name. But I think you could probably imagine what audit partners think about this. Audit partners, they don't love this idea. This increases liability potentially, right? This is all hypothetical. It might increase liability for the audit firm. When the audit firm gets sued, because the individual audit partner's name is now disclosed, that could open that individual audit partner up to possible personal liability. Not yet, they can't actually be sued individually yet, but there's only a very small fine line rule that is stopping that from happening that could very easily change in the future. It's the rule that the SEC has that they would have to be named as an expert in order to be sued individually, but that could easily change. Audit partners also think that this is distracting information. There's lots of people that work on this audit. It's not just this one audit partner, and that might be misleading to the investing public. They might rely on erroneous information about that audit partner that really is not true or distracts from audit quality. That's possible. And they also claim that it doesn't really improve audit quality because they think accountability is already high enough. So this is sort of a he said, she said. It is very possible that everyone is right in certain circumstances. But the other thing that auditors have expressed in their comment letters and to the PCAOB and publicly is that they're worried that this could lead to creation of algorithms or proprietary systems that maybe, you know, Charles Schwab uses to collect all sorts of information. Now that they have the audit partner's name, they could theoretically design a star rating system that rates the quality of an audit partner. Okay, so that is the purpose of this study, is to explore that possibility. So our research questions for this study are, would it really make a difference if there were a star rating system? Would investors care about it? If you're thinking about someone that works for Charles Schwab, you would think that they would make their decisions, their trading decisions, about more than just an audit partner's star rating, right? This shouldn't really be distracting to them if they are truly professionals. And then, you know, with regards to non-professional investors, so you and I, if we were to go online and decide that we want to buy a couple shares of stock, would it be distracting to us? Maybe it would. Maybe we put more weight on it than we should, or maybe we put the right amount of weight on it. And the idea that I'm trying to convey is that I'm not trying to say that this would be a good or a bad thing. In some cases, I might very much want to know whether or not the auditor has a 1-star rating or a 5-star rating. In some cases, that could be distracting and irrelevant. And the question that we are truly asking is, would I make a different decision based on it? There's lots of research to be done here, but that's what we are focusing on, is would this affect investor decision making? Would they make different choices if the star quality of that auditor conflicts with the actual financial performance of the firm? Okay, that's a little bit more specific way to state our question. And then prior to having this information about the audit partner, knowing their name, really all we could tell was industry expertise. We used to use that as an indicator of audit quality. And so the question that we are asking, in addition to whether or not a star rating system would make a difference, is does industry expertise interact with that? Is it more important, less important? Does it change how an investor would interpret a star rating system? And then finally, we are curious, do professional investors behave differently than non-professional investors? So people that actually trade for a living versus people that trade for their own benefit. And I would like to invite anyone to, you know, raise their hand at any point if there's clarification question or something you'd like to know. So we took those research questions and we've just put together some null hypotheses, and we state them in the null for a specific reason, and that's because we really are not sure whether investors will make different decisions based on this information. And we would like to explore that in a few different ways. So the null hypothesis is that they will not. They will not take a star quality rating system into account. They will choose the best financially performing firm to invest their money in, regardless of what we tell them about the audit partner's star rating. And then the second hypothesis is that the same is true about industry expertise. They will choose the best financially performing firm, regardless of what we tell them about the audit partner's expertise. All right. Then we also wanted to know a few other things. So we have some research questions here that sort of depend on what happens with our hypothesis testing. So we want to know, does industry expertise interact with the star quality rating system? Does it magnify any effects? Does it mitigate effects? How does it interact with it? And then finally, we want to know, do professional investors consider the information differently than non-professional? So to test these things, we designed a study. And this was supposed to be an animation, but it's already highlighted. So we designed a study, and what we did was we took our participants, professional and non-professional investors, and asked them which company they'd invest in. And I've highlighted Keynote technology because we purposely made Keynote technology look financially obviously better than the other two tech companies. You can see that with their earnings per share and their return on equity. And we pre-tested this with professional investors. We had some people look at it, Charles Schwab employees look at it, and let us know if this was enough information that they'd be able to answer the question, would they invest $10,000 in one of these firms? And that's why that's highlighted to there is a clear financial winner, a best performing firm. So then we designed our experiment as a 3x3x2, meaning that we manipulated 3 different things. The first thing we manipulated was the star quality of the auditor, and we manipulated that on 3 levels. So 3 different groups. We split our participants up into 3 different groups. A third of them were told that one of the competing firms, one of the competitors, had 5 stars, the auditor, the audit partner. So it was an attractive quality about one of the competitor firms. And then we also manipulated the performance firm as being unattractive. So remember that the performance firm is the best financially performing firm. And so we made it look unattractive by saying that the audit partner only had 1 star. And then a third group just saw that all 3 firms had a good auditor, 3 out of 5 stars. So again, we're basically introducing some conflicting information. It specifically conflicts with the financial performance information that we've given them. Here's this clearly better performing firm, and then here's some conflicting information about the audit partner. Then we did something similar with industry expertise, except industry expertise you can't manipulate in the same way. It's not a 5-star scale. Either an audit partner has industry expertise or they do not. They could be in the middle, but that's a very difficult thing to manipulate in an experimental setting. It's difficult to convince people of a midpoint. So we went with they are or they are not an expert. And so what we wanted to know, if you recall from the hypotheses, is that we wanted to know if this magnified or mitigated any impact of the star quality. So we just made the attractive competitor have high expertise in one setting, and that would potentially magnify the 5-star auditor, right? If a participant read that, it would magnify that. And if then we also made the performance firm have high expertise, so that could mitigate that. And then a control group just saw that nobody had any specific industry expertise. Then we also have investor type. That's the last thing we manipulated, and we manipulated it on 2 levels by running this study with professional investors and non-professional investors. And this is actually a cool thing about this study is we actually got to, back in pre-COVID times when they had live CFP review sessions, we were invited into a CFP review session. CFP candidates have to take certain education requirements, and by CFP I mean certified financial planner, and you have to be a CFP to trade on behalf of someone else. So they have to meet an education requirement and complete some coursework, and the coursework culminates in a test, and then they can achieve this certification. So we went into some of these review sessions on a break, after lunch, and facilitated our study, and we got 159 participants over the course of about 1.5 years going into different sessions. And then the non-professional investors, we used Amazon MTurk, and that is a platform that you can pay people $1 to fill out a survey, and you can also have screening questions to make sure that they meet a few basic requirements. But they were not professional investors. So just to kind of give you an idea of what our study looked like after they read about the financial performance, these are the different groups. So the top half of this chart right here shows you how we talked about the auditors. We gave them a name: John Marsh, William Johnson, Robert Chandler. And then we gave that partner a rating. The control group, everybody was good. Then a third of the people saw the performance firm had a poor quality auditor. And then a third of the people saw that one of the competitor firms had an excellent auditor. So that's conflicting with that financial performance of Keynote being the top performer. Then the other manipulation is the number of tech clients. So an industry expert usually has on average at least 2 public clients in the same industry. They would be considered an industry expert. And so we said, relative to 0. In one case, the performance firm had an industry expert, and you can see that that could either conflict, right? It could mitigate the poor performing auditor, or it could magnify it, right? If we had told them that the competitor firm had an excellent auditor, I'm sorry, this one could conflict. It could mitigate. And then in this one, the number of tech clients with the competitor, this could magnify the conflicting information. So this is like basically more conflicting information or less. All right. So because, sorry about the yellow boxes, the Blackboard kind of moved them a little bit. Our study has 9 cells, right? We've manipulated these 2 variables, star quality and expertise, on 3 different levels. So a participant could be in any one of these groups. And the yellow boxes were meant to highlight when expertise is high for the competitor firm and star quality is high for the competitor firm, for example. All right, that they've basically seen double the conflicting information. They've seen the attractive competitor firm in terms of star quality and expertise. So that's a magnify situation. And the one next to it, where they saw low performance of the low quality, low stars of the performance firm, that's unattractive. But they've also seen attractive information about the competitor. That's, again, a magnifying situation. 2 pieces of conflicting information with financial performance. And then the other 2 groups down here at the bottom that are important, all other groups are really a control group for something. And the 2 at the bottom are, the conflicting information of star quality, but then the expertise information is in the opposite direction. So it might mitigate that conflicting information. All right, so that's our experimental design. And because there's so much information that we're manipulating, we have so many groups, presenting the results becomes challenging, especially in a manuscript. So hopefully I'll be able to, make that clearer for you. So this is our first table. And what this table shows you is, depending on which group a participant was in, and whether they were non-professional or professional, what investment decision did they make? And the percentage is how many people in that group decided to invest their $10,000 in the highest performing firm, the performance firm. So you'll notice this first column is the group for our star quality. Everybody, all the audit partners, everybody in this group saw all the audit partners had 3 stars, and that was labeled as good. So non-professional investors, 67% invested in the top performer, and professional investors, 84%. Now comparing that column to the other 2, so the middle column, attractive competitor, right? I've told you now that the competitor firm has a 5-star quality auditor. And you can see that non-professional investors, 72, 67. I don't have any statistics here about whether that's statistically different, but just glancing at it, it doesn't look nearly as different as when I told them that there was an unattractive star quality of the performance firm's auditor. So I've told this group that here's this top performing firm, but their auditor only got 1 star out of 5. And only 31% then chose to invest their money in it. But when I told them that the competitor had 5 stars, you know, the number even is a little more. That's non-professional investors. And you can see a similar pattern for professional investors. When I told them that the competitor had an attractive, highly rated auditor, they didn't change their minds too much. But when I told them that the performance firm had a low quality auditor, they did. They changed their minds. So that is, you know, sort of initial evidence that our null hypothesis is not supported. And then this is the same information for industry expertise. And remember, industry expertise, I either told them that the competitor had an expert auditor, or I told them that the performance firm had an expert auditor. So you can see the differences here between the control group, where I didn't tell them any of that. When I told them there was an attractive competitor, it didn't really change their minds. But when I told them that there was an attractive performance firm, the performance firm not only performed the best financially, but also had this expert auditor, the number went up here. And so that's kind of distinct for non-professionals, but not so distinct for, same pattern, but not so distinct for professional. And so these are kind of the things that we've only analyzed the full model. We haven't started to dig into some of these little differences, but that might be interesting. So let me show you the statistical analysis. So we just ran a regression, and this is where it gets a little hard to present the details. But the first 2 variables, that was our first hypothesis, which was we don't think that investors are going to change their minds if we tell them anything about star quality that conflicts with financial performance. Basically, we think that they will invest their money in the top performing firm no matter what. And this is all investors, all non-professional and professional. And we find that that null hypothesis is not true, right? They do change their minds. They significantly change their minds. And they more significantly change their minds when I tell them about the unattractive performance firm. This highly performing firm has a bad auditor. You'll notice that none of the variables about the expertise are significant, and none of the interactions are either. Basically, what it looks like from this initial analysis is that the expertise information didn't change their minds at all. They didn't really consider it. And then we did ask them to select the top performing firm before we gave them any additional information. And we put that in here as a control variable, and that significantly predicted who they invested in, which is not surprising, right? It's highly correlated. So that is our initial results. This star quality thing makes a big difference. And it's somewhat surprising that expertise did not, even when it magnifies the star quality difference. So overall, our major findings are that when we provide this conflicting information, investors are really sensitive to it. Specifically, they are more likely to invest in a highly rated auditor than they are in a highly performing firm. And remember, the performance firm, even when the competitor had a highly rated auditor, the performance firm still had a good auditor, right? It's not like we told them that it was terrible, but it did make a difference. They were more likely to invest in that competitor. And then investors were less likely, this was even stronger. Remember, investors were less likely to invest in the performing firm if they had a poorly rated auditor. So I did not like to, investors do not like to see that they have a bad auditor relative to a competitor with a good auditor. Okay. The absence of findings, just to summarize that, people didn't really care too much about industry expertise. And they didn't really care too much about industry expertise regardless of whether it was more or less conflicting information. And then we found that professional investors and non-professional investors overall were both sensitive. The patterns are the same. And I think that we noticed some things in the descriptive statistics that there might be some differences in the strength of their reaction, but the direction of their reaction was the same regardless of whether they're pros or not. And I think, if I'm being honest, my initial suspicions before we ran this actual experiment were that they would be different. I thought professional investors would be less sensitive to this information, and that non-professional investors would be very highly swayed. But it turns out that they all were. So there are some whys, and you know, we have a lot. We've written some about our theory, and we did base our predictions and our experimental design in theory, but we're still interpreting the results in the context of those theories. So source credibility is a strong one when it comes to providing information about an auditor. So what I mean by that is that investor decision making, where they want to invest their money, if they're impacted by information about the auditor, it's likely because that information provides some credibility to the financial statements, right? So if I provide conflicting information about the auditor, that they're a low performing auditor or that a competitor has a high performing auditor, it might make me interpret that financial information differently. Okay, I consider the credibility of that source, and I would very much think of the auditor as one of the sources of the financial information. I attach the credibility of the source to how I interpret the financial information. So that's part of what's going on here, we believe. And then this other idea that less is better. And let me explain what I mean here with less is better. There are some studies in psychology about this phenomenon where people generally will choose something that is actually of lower value than something else just because there's something wrong with the other one. So this example of the dinnerware I think is the best. People were more likely to choose this 24-piece set of dinnerware, just white dishes. I would rather have that than this 31-piece set, which has 31 pieces intact, same exact set. So those 24 pieces are within this 31. You basically get 7 more pieces, and then you also get maybe 3 or 4 broken ones. So clearly the 31-piece set is bigger, has more, but because of those broken pieces, I'm less likely to choose it. And we actually think that might be a little bit of what's going on here, is that we've told them, like, here's this better performing firm, but because there's something bad about it, and that's why we saw that really strong reaction to when the performance firm had a poor performing auditor, and less of a strong reaction to when the competitor firm had an excellent auditor. Maybe less is perceived as better, right? I'd rather have that lesser performing, financially performing firm than a highly performing firm with a bad auditor. So that is all, and I realize that that is less than our time available, but I can open up to questions if anybody has any. And maybe I'd be interested also to hear, like, did that make sense to you? And if I lost you, at what point did I lose you?
Erin.
Yes.
Well, hold on, somebody raised their hand? No. Who were your non-professional investors, out of curiosity?
So we used,
I might have missed that.
Oh, it's okay. We used Amazon Mechanical Turk to recruit those people. So if you're unfamiliar with that, what it is Amazon has this service, MTurk they call it. And actually you and I can go on it right now and become MTurkers if we want. And basically you get paid to participate in studies. And so you can be selective about what you want to participate in based on how much it pays or how little it pays. You have to pay people, minimum wage. So you can, we did not pay much for our participants. We paid a very low amount to our participants. So, it took us a little longer to fill our study. And then you can also, if you're the researcher, you can set screening questions. So, I only want people that have invested in stock before. You know, I don't want them to be professionals, but I want them to know how to, you know, I want them to have bought a share of stock before. They are investing, or they are somewhat familiar with investing, but they're not doing it for a job. And we pay them. And so, yeah, we got 144 people. And so, yeah, the less you pay them, the longer it takes to fill your study. But that's where they came from.
Sorry, Peisch raised his hand.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a second. Good afternoon.
Hi.
That was interesting. You know, that was well outside of my ballpark, but it was interesting because as a novice, and you know, I'm curious. I have like 2 questions, so don't laugh at me because that's just really kind of.
I would never.
So this reminds me of, you know, the psychology of choice, right? And with regard to the symbolism of the stars, right? The ranking of the stars and how we're so used to seeing, you know, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, etc. I'm curious. I may have missed it. You may have mentioned it, but I'm curious. Was there any indication that the stars that were selected, you know, led to the person or the investor digging a little deeper into researching the company or what have you before making that decision as to whether or not the 10,000 was going to be invested?
Yeah, no, we very much did this in a vacuum, I'd say. So we made these companies up. We didn't give them any additional information than what I showed you on the slides. So we're really trying to turn as few dials as possible in terms of the information that they have, and looking at it in a vacuum. But when you mention psychology research and about the stars and things, there is a lot out there about star rating systems that we are currently reading and thinking about in terms of what is the psychology behind just a ranking system, period, that could be interesting and relevant to our study.
And then another one, again, I may have missed it, but what was the basis of $10,000 as the amount? And I wondered what if it had been $100,000, you know,
yes.
or $1 million?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did consider that. And 10,000, I don't have any proof that it's the right number, but it definitely, other studies have relied on that same kind of number when when studying investor decision making, because you don't want it to be too much, right? You want it to be enough that it makes a difference, that they'll actually look at that financial performance, and you want it to be enough that they could really put them, especially non-professional investors, really put themselves in the shoes where they might be able to have $10,000 to invest, but not so much that the amount that is being invested ends up driving their decisions. You know, because what we want to study is whether what the information we've given them changes their decisions, not the amount, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Those are good questions. Bonnie, you were going to say something?
I apologize for my phone ringing. It only rings when you're in the middle of a meeting, right? So the non-professional investors, do you have any notion that they had enough expertise to know which one of the companies was the obviously better company?
So we did ask them that question right after we showed them that performance information to make sure that they grasped it.
Okay.
So right after I showed them that information, I asked them which one is the top performer, and we actually, I've shown you the results where I even included some of the ones that didn't properly identify it at the beginning, but we've run the study where we dropped all of those people as well, and we got the same exact results.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I cannot believe you.
Never.
So sorry.
Never done.
Turn my sound off.
Okay. But yeah, so when I was explaining those results and the tables. Could you follow? Did you know which group people were in? Okay, that's such a relief because we've had a few people read the manuscript so far. I'm not sure it comes across as well in the writing yet. But,
you know, I guess I'm not reviewing it, but it would probably be, if I were a reviewer, one of the things that I always look at when I'm looking at the tables and graphic figures is how well the legend explains what I'm looking at. You know,
yes.
that could be the difference of a sentence or just some minor reorganization of how you bring your most salient points to the top. So that helps them focus, especially with tables that have numerically rich content.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually a very good point. And currently, the manuscript doesn't have much detail in the legend because we just threw the tables together and then asked a couple of people to read it. So maybe that's exactly why they're still confused.
It's field dependent too, right? It's like every area of specialty has a standard way that they present their data and things like that. So,
in the experimental accounting world, people are most comfortable with a 2x2, where I only manipulate on 2 levels and I only manipulate 2 variables. And we manipulated 3 on 3 levels. And so we kind of face a little bit of a wall where as soon as people see that, they automatically throw their hands up and say, nope, I'm confused.
Right.
So we have that.
But you made sure that you explicitly explained, right, your rationale for using a 3x3 relative to the industry standard 2x2.
Right? I want to say yes, but now that you're making me say it out loud, I'm not sure I feel enough conviction that I have done so, and I'm going to go back and revisit that section and make sure I have explicitly stated why, because the real that we really felt strongly that we needed a control group. Otherwise, we would have done it with just a 2x2, but we really felt like in order to make sense of this, we needed to be able to compare everybody to a group that did not have that information. We needed a baseline. And then we also felt really strongly, because we could have manipulated star quality just one of those, right? I could have just told people, like half of the people, that the competing firm had a great auditor. But we thought this could be different, right? If I tell them that the competing firm has a good auditor, or the best auditor, that could be different than if I tell them that the best firm has a crappy auditor, right? And so we really wanted to look at both ways, both directions. I kind of think of it as like positive conflicting information, to draw you away from the high-performing firm, or negative conflicting information where it's telling you the high-performing firm is bad for some reason, rather than just not as good in some category. And so, yeah, I think that we probably should make that much more explicit, why we have these 2 very specific manipulations, because you could also do it a number of different ways. I mean, I think that there are a number of different ways that the study could have been designed. Yeah. One challenge that we also have is the, we say, with star quality, we say the competitor firm has a great auditor and the performance bad auditor. But then with industry expertise, we don't do that. We don't do it. It doesn't parallel it. We say the competitor firm has an expert auditor, or the performance firm has an expert auditor. So 2 pieces of positive information. And that's difficult for people to wrap their minds around, even though there is a reason for it. And the reason is really that expertise can't be manipulated in the same exact way as a convenient 5-star scale. It's difficult to establish a midpoint. But with a 5-star system, I can say 3 stars. It's right in the middle. There's no question about it. But if I tell you that an auditor has 2 industry clients versus 4, is that really a distinct enough difference for you to think that this is a middle of the road expert versus a highly expert? It gets difficult to interpret the results because you can't be sure that the midpoint came across in your experiment. thank you everyone for participating. I really
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk out loud about it. It was that's the first time that I've sent any of this out loud, so that was really useful for me in the storytelling.